The other things that we want to focus on here, and the reason that we're doing this assignment, is so that you can first of all think about the text of Heart of Darkness through the lens of these essays, to get away from the idea of this as just a story, that ultimately it's just telling a story and its connections with all of these sort of questions of race and empire and so on are less important, and to think instead about stories as part of our cultural condition and part of the ideology of its era. The way stories are told produces and reproduces ideologies, and therefore reading stories, especially reading stories of going abroad, allows us to engage with those cultures and with those societies, and to understand how storytelling itself reproduces those ideologies. And in some ways, Heart of Darkness is a perfect story for this, because it is a story about storytelling. The way that Marlowe's story is sort of framed, that he is telling this story to a seemingly blank, maybe even slightly skeptical audience, forces us to call into question everything about it. It's sort of studiously ambiguous and undecidable and untrustworthy, and so it is drawing attention in its own way to the to how problematic storytelling can actually be. It's sort of about its own undecidability. The other reason I want to focus on this is to ask you to look at criticism, to look at critical responses to novels, not as acts that just explain or interpret a book or that help us understand it, but rather as ideological acts themselves. By focusing on what Achebe is doing and why he's doing it, and looking at Said and why he sort of corrects, I don't want to say corrects Achebe, but offers an alternative perspective to Achebe, is to study the agenda of these authors, and to understand that when they engage in criticism, they're engaging in a political act, and that as readers we need to be attuned to that. We need to be sure that we're not simply extracting information from critics as if it were neutral, that in some ways it's always sort of ideologically based. Last thing that I want to emphasize before I go is read the rubric. The last couple of assignments, a lot of people have dropped a lot of points by not doing things that are actually being asked of you in the assignment. So the last two assignments, actually, a lot of people didn't deal, for example, with any secondary material or anything like that. We're dealing primarily with secondary material in this assignment, but I'm just using it as an example to say, if you overlook something that the assignment is asking you to do, you will lose those points. So a little bit of care in the preparation can make a big difference. Okay, so best of luck with it, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch.